Come to a realization that this might be the first or one of the first times that you have been asked to create the synthesis of original documents. Now you can go to the assignment, and please do, and look at the examples of a bunch of different, there's interviews, newspaper articles, there's, policy documents. There's all kinds of things like that you can look at and go to the assignment, because there's a bunch more. I have now shown two of your classmates this idea to, like, when students have asked me, what am I looking for when it's talking about original artifacts or original documents? And so I'm taking two of my articles that I was a co-author on. I was deeply involved in creating the theoretical framework and the research design, and in writing up said research design, and also in carrying out the synthesis. Now, what I've noticed is you've been in the program about a year now. You all have gotten really good at creating a literature review. You've gotten really good at saying, here's what other people have said, and these other people are super knowledgeable about it. This is what they've taught me, kind of a thing. And you make your own. We call that a synthesis, but here you're going to synthesize the actual research findings. So work with me a little bit. What we're talking about in this article is Georgia and North Carolina were experiencing a big boom in language minoritized students, mostly speaking Spanish. And we wanted to see what were the media saying about dual language immersion programs. Now, one thing you have to know is up until about 2000-ish, like 1997 to 2000, we had awesome bilingual education in this country that was for and by people who were primarily speakers of languages that weren't English. The 2002 No Child Left Behind Act completely eradicated the word bilingual from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. When that got eliminated, not only were those students erased, metaphorically speaking, but the money going to bilingual education was erased. From that late 90s to present, what's happened is what a lot of scholars are calling the gentrification of dual language, where primarily white, primarily upper middle class, primarily monolingual English speakers have come into dual language immersion programs, and they've created them for students who already have a leg up in the United States. They're not for students who are language minoritized, meaning they speak a language that isn't English. So that's what that's about, blah, 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 okay? But so here's what I want to show. We have a literature review, right? Like, we talk all about that background that I just gave you really quickly. We talk about that explosion in North Carolina and Georgia. We talk about what's specific to North Carolina, what's specific to Georgia, and we keep on going. And then we talk, this is where I want to show you how you talk about finding original artifacts, right? So look at this part where it says data collection, and what we're going to do is what's called a critical media critical media analysis, right? So in 2017, that's when we did the research. We all know what terms are used to describe these programs now. We look for dual language program, dual language immersion, and 2A immersion with a location set in Google on North Carolina or Georgia. And what we were specifically trying to find was what the media, like what newspapers, what news outlets, what press releases were saying about dual language immersion programs in Georgia and North Carolina. Long story short, we found 50 documents in North Carolina and 28 in Georgia. So then our two research questions with these data, were whose voices are shaping dual language immersion media, like who's actually talking about this in these places, and then what are the overarching themes of what they're saying, right? Now, you don't have to do a chart, but I'll show you what a chart shows. And I wish I would have done this by most to least. It would have been a little more effective, but there are reasons we didn't. But when you look at whose voices are most heard across those almost 80 articles, 20 of the voices heard are by principals and vice principals, 17 are from district administrators, And 5, this is part of why we didn't do it this way, were State Department of Education. So like, here in Colorado, that would be the Colorado Department of Education. And then look at who's like not there a lot, right? You got a school community liaison who deals with the families. You got a partnership, that would be like a university partnership. Notice there's not a lot of professor voices here, if any. There's 3, sorry. Ironically, one of the co-authors was one of those 3 out of the 80. But like, you're hearing very little from actual experts, right? From people who are studying this stuff. You're hearing very little from the people who work with families. And you're hearing very little from families. And one of you is looking at student voices. You're not seeing anything from the students, right? And so you could read the next few pages, but this chart shows you whose voices are dominating media discourses about dual language immersion. So a chart, is worth 1,000 words kind of a thing, right? And then we talk about them because that's what you do in APA. But then, what are the themes? And that's where it starts here. And I could show you them, but it'd be easier to look at the chart, right? And so here's an example of a chart, right? So out of those 78 news articles and magazines and press releases, the number one thing was what we call the neoliberal narratives of global human capital. And the idea about that is giving the students, because they speak an additional language, an economic edge. So they'll get to go be a tour guide in Spain, or they'll get a leg up in jobs. Or one of them in Georgia, where I lived at the time, was about how there was, I don't remember whether it was like Yamaha or Honda had a factory, or Toyota in Atlanta area, and so like they can go work for the Japanese because they'll speak Japanese. And so out of all of the different codes, 109 of them were about this global human this competitive edge. Okay, the next one were about cognitive and those kind of things, and there were 58 narratives there. But you can go and you look and you have an example, like a little thing taken out. So we have like our nerd term for it over here. This is just one way of doing it. I'm not telling you it's the only way. Our nerd term that the literature review told us to look for. Here's an example from the actual documents we looked at. And then here's how many times this kind of narrative appeared in the literature. And I can make it a little smaller, and you can see, out of 198 total codes, 109 were this this global human capital, this competitive edge kind of a thing. So that's that article, right? And then we'd go, and after we did that, we'd discuss it. We'd find, here's what we observed, and here's how we did it. So instead of looking at it as this expert taught us about this, here's these original documents and what they're showing us as we analyze them. That's an original artifact, okay? I'm going to do one more. I hope this is helping, and I'm just trying to walk you through it. It's a similar type article. We're seeing how the narratives have been taken over, but this time, instead of newspaper articles, and this is what I wanted to show you, we went and we looked at the actual policies. So we went and we looked at, let me make this a little smaller. We went and we looked at, we had items for 50 states, and one of the things that we did was we wanted to see which states copied what is called the Utah model. I don't want to go into super deep detail about it, but after looking through policy documents, district websites, district press releases, some of the states and or some of the districts were willing to send their training PowerPoints to us. So everything that we could find, we found 3 states, Wyoming, Delaware, and Georgia, followed what we called the Utah model in the paper. And so this talks about all those things. And look again, we're looking for dual language, dual immersion, world language, two-way immersion to try to find these items. Does that mean we went and read tens of thousands of different policy documents? No, it meant that we went and looked through them with Control F if you're a PC user, or Command F if you're a Mac user, and we tried to find these terms in the documents, right? And so then you could go and dig into them. So long story short, Georgia, Delaware, Wyoming followed the pattern. And we write a little bit about them. We write why this Utah model is, I'm using the word exciting to policymakers. And one of the big ones is it's called the 50-50 model. Hey, you spend half the day in English, you spend half the day in Spanish. That makes sense for everybody. No, it doesn't. It doesn't if you don't... If tons of research shows if you're in this country, and I'm going to use Spanish as an example, if Spanish is your native language and you only speak Spanish at home, a 90-10 model is more useful. And so what we did, and I'm going to do this for you again, is we created a chart to show, hey, these states really did follow Utah's model. And you don't need to know a lot about this, but you can look at this chart, and if you know, hey, here's what Utah does, and then here's what Georgia, Delaware, and Wyoming do, you can see that they're very, very similar in how they do their language, how they pick their teachers, who's in them, and what the language policy is. And so that's an example, right? I don't know if I had another chart for you. Oh, here we go. And then once again, not just in that one, it was like how closely does it follow the Utah model was the first chart. The second chart is which of these documents talk about that global human capital that we found from the other article. And check this out. In Delaware, 13 out of 16 mention they're going to be able to get better jobs. In Georgia, 11 out of 12, and in Wyoming, 1 out of 6 of the documents talked about that. And so then you go and you talk about how it all worked together. So what does this have to do with your final project? What it has to do with your final project is you're now the investigator. You're now the one going to find and synthesize data. So whatever your topic may be, you go and what do you want to look at? And I'm going to tell you the honest truth. A lot of times I don't know when I start. And I'm going to also tell you the other honest truth. My research questions morph often, right? Like if you start finding, like let's say I said, how does this language separation policy impact speakers of Spanish and English? And then all of a sudden I find a bucket load about Portuguese and English. I might have to change the language up. Or, hey, I'm looking for how this impacts racial dynamics in classrooms or whatever. And I start looking at the documents and I'm like, that's not coming out, but gender sure is. It's okay for your questions to morph, right? So let me go back to what were the questions in this one, because I didn't specifically, that was one of the things I wanted to look at with you on both of them. Although I told you what they were in the other one. This one was a little more nerdy and policy based, and we looked at the actual policies. I'm trying to find where are our research questions. There's Utah. Oh, it was, that's what the two, I can't find them right now, but it was what states follow this Utah model, and then what are the narratives in their policy documents, and I didn't go through all that because the charts weren't showing that right now. But I'm hoping this helps. I know I'm just kind of rambling. The two students that I did this with said that the rambling helped them see the difference between reading articles for the literature review. And I'm going to be honest, the literature review, especially for qualitative researchers, is there to show the reader, look, I read my stuff and I know what I'm talking about because I'm the tool, I'm the instrument that is going to be used to conduct this qualitative research. But then if you're doing with original artifacts or original documents or you're wanting to see what do the things that I'm evaluating out there, what is the story that they're telling, either by the number of times something's mentioned or by this the same narrative keeps popping up, or this same problem keeps showing up and here are some solutions that keep popping up. And so look at the description of the assignment for different ideas. I hope that this has given you some other ones to see the difference between what I'm reading when I'm reading for a literature review versus what I'm reading when I'm doing content or media or discourse analysis and trying to look at the artifacts themselves as the sources of what I'm trying to synthesize for my own research. I hope this helps. Feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. I feel now that I'm certainly rambling. I hope this helps.